TEA really was the opportunity for me to actually work check-in desk at their industry mixers. They do industry mixers around the world. And in Orlando, they were frequent. They're about once a month. And I used the check-in desk as an opportunity to understand who was there, what their companies were, and what they looked like. And then I would go home and I would go on LinkedIn and I would say, okay, how does show control relate to rock work? I have no idea. And then the next time I would see the person who did show control, the next mixer, I'd say, oh, hi, I'm Melissa. Can you tell me about how this interacted with each other on this attraction?
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast.
Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going fantastically, Josh. How are you?
Doing well. Question for you.
You got it.
If I were to say themed entertainment, how would you define that term?
How long do you have?
I have 3 hours.
Okay. Then we can dive pretty deep into it. But if you didn't have 3 hours, I might say this is an experience where you are immersed in a story. And I might leave it at that because I think you can go that would be my short answer. And then there's the 3 hour answer, which could go into so many different things. Like I even think about elements of what I might consider a themed environment or a themed entertainment. I see things at the grocery store where they're telling stories about where the fruit came from, or they're, trying to get you to go in a certain way based on how they've, laid out the store and things of that nature. So I don't know that that would show up on anybody's radar as a themed experience or themed entertainment, but I think they're using elements of those storytelling tactics.
I think you might be able to make a decent argument that a grocery store, if done very intentionally, could be a themed experience that is very different from, say, riding Rise of the Resistance at Galaxy's Edge at Disney's Hollywood Studios or at Disneyland.
Yes.
So and I think that actually brings in the point that that I'm looking for here is that it's a very broad definition. And Absolutely. I really like your very concise version of it, of an experience that brings you into a story, I think, because that can be taken into so many different ways. When we think of themed entertainment or themed experience, by default, we often think of the largest, huge investments into destination theme parks, whereas maybe we should be thinking of if I'm, in the eggs aisle at the grocery store, it is telling me a lot of information I wouldn't have even thought to ask about the eggs I'm going to buy, and that's going to influence my purchase experience. Therefore, it all falls into the same category.
So I have a kind of maybe a follow-up question then. This maybe get into a slight nerd category, but you talk about the grocery store, that's a real thing, right? The story of the grocery store. And then you go into something like Rise of the Resistance, or many of the places that we might consider a traditional themed experience. And it's about a story that we're, for lack of a better term, making up. Harry Potter, right? It's in the books, it's in the movies. We can't go physically do it unless you go to a Universal theme park, right? So is there a difference, a delineation between that experience that we have at the grocery store in the egg aisle versus the definition we might say for the Wizarding World of Harry Potter? Let me take this one step further, because one of the things that I thought of when we talk about story is the St. Augustine Lighthouse, right? Was a working lighthouse. Everything about that property tells the story of the innkeeper and the lighthouse keeper. And, you know, there's a reality to it, because this is something that really happened. There are people on site that have gone and, you know, into the ocean and pulled out artifacts of shipwrecks, and there are people building boats right there. You can talk to the boat builders. That's a story, right? I would feel very immersed, and I have felt very immersed in the stories that they're telling. So is that a themed environment, or is that just a real environment where I'm engaged in the story,
I think that would dive into our 3-hour conversation, but I'm going to be thinking about this for the rest of the day. But the reason I bring it up is because Melissa Oviedo is the Chief Business Officer for BMorrow Productions, which is a design studio for themed experiences and themed entertainment. And speaking of which, she is also the president of the Themed Entertainment Association's International Board of Directors. And we get to talk to her today about all things, not just about themed experience, but about the business of themed experiences as well.
And one of the things I really appreciated that she said that actually kind of ties into the conversation you and I just had, and maybe a future conversation, who knows, is that when you really expand the definition of themed experiences and themed entertainment, there's so many more opportunities out there for people than, you know, being an Imagineer, right? That may be the pinnacle of what people look for. And I'm going to be an Imagineer, or, you know, I want to design attractions for Universal. That's great. But those positions are very limited. You know, you might be the perfect person to tell the egg story in the egg aisle of the supermarket, and that becomes your niche, right? And think of how many supermarkets are out there. That could be a huge business for someone. But getting back to the interview, she does such a great job of telling us about the business, kind of the behind the scenes of, you know, many people will see the end result of all this effort and all this hard work and all this creativity and all this dedication that goes into it. But there's so much more that has to go beyond that, so that these businesses can be sustainable, so that we can keep getting these experiences.
Yeah. And that's one of the things she talked about, is about sustainable growth of the business, and in her case, in BMorrow Productions. And I think that there were a lot of things that she talked about that I was taking a lot of notes of how can I implement this into my business from that standpoint, so that there can be continual business growth, and from a sustainability perspective, and not just growth for the sake of growth, but being able to do it very efficiently. She also talks about building perspectives, and I think it was really important and really inspiring. And I love when we get to hear people talk about how they're really implementing this into their business, of giving people a seat at the table, or at least a voice at the table, because that makes the experiences richer when they come from a wide range of individuals and a wide range of diverse groups of people, to create, well, the best culture within that business, and create that environment, and then also into the end product as well, for those who are going to be experiencing it. So I just loved hearing Melissa's perspective.
And what I will take as one step further with that is how she talked about it from the perspective of the core, and how if we're not living the core, it's not going to have the impact that we want it to have. So we really have to ensure that from, you know, everybody in the organization, that they understand the purpose, they understand the mission, that they are bought into it, and that they are living that core belief and that core purpose, because that's ultimately what's going to drive your business.
Mm-hmm. And she also talks about asking the right questions, which was woven throughout a number of times throughout the interview, but kind of culminated into a very solid career advice that she gives about getting into themed entertainment, themed design, and designing attractions and experiences, and those who are looking to build a career in the business, and about how to ask the right questions, which she sums up very eloquently.
So I have one last question for you. Did we ask all the right questions to Melissa in this interview?
I think that's up to our audience to decide.
I would agree.
One question for you is, should we get to this interview now with Melissa Oviedo?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it. Hey, Melissa, welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. We are so excited to chat with you today. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing very well. So to kick this off, Melissa, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us all about what you do?
Oh boy. Yeah. So Melissa Oviedo. Currently, I am the Chief Business Officer for BMorrow Productions. BMorrow is a design and production studio here in Orlando, Florida. And I'm fortunate enough, I've joined the team back in January of 2024. And my role in the company is really looking at the organization's growth plan. It's one thing to grow, it's another thing to really have a sustainable business model and a sustainable growth plan. We do some amazing work and have some amazing emerging talent in both the creative realms as well as in production. And my role is really, how do we continue to foster that? How do we bring in the right projects and the right people, really doing the right things, and in order to not to be able to continue to catapult the business forward. So fortunate to work alongside of Brian Morrow, who's the owner and founder. And then previous to that, I was able to spend about 12 years with Nassal, who is a scenic and theming fabricator also here in Orlando, and I was their vice president of global development for 12 years. So yeah, so I've only actually been in the industry for just about 13 years. Before that, I was in finance, and then I was in manufacturing. So very, very different background than probably most have found their kind of way into themed entertainment or themed experience.
Well, I would love to hear, Melissa, how that background in manufacturing and finance has helped you in your roles, because, you know, it seems like we are a product of everything we do. So there's probably something from those roles that you're still kind of using today.
Yeah, so, you know, it's interesting. So manufacturing, I'm not an engineer. That is not my background. What manufacturing really taught me is really understanding how to ask the right questions to the right people. Nobody ever expected me to be the expert in the specific type of product that we were developing. I was in international marketing. I also got to do a lot of travel globally with that organization. So understanding different cultures, understanding different cultural norms, in particular, how to have dinner with people from around the world was something that was really unique as a young, recent college graduate. How you engage with somebody over a dinner table in Germany versus Sweden versus Japan versus China versus India is very, very different. And I got a lot of that global exposure when I was in manufacturing. And in finance, I'm also not a math person. Anybody who knows me knows that math is literally probably not my forte. But there, it really taught me, again, know the right people, know the right questions to ask, and attention to detail was very, very important for me. And also speed of responding. Numbers are very black and white, and I tend to live in a shade of gray constantly. So when you're asking questions and needing to communicate with somebody who lives in black or white, you have to be very specific and very detail oriented in what you're asking. So you can get the right types of questions answered and get the right type of information to inform what you're looking to make a decision on. So those two roles really shaped me a lot in how you do business and how you interact with different types of personalities around the table.
Mm-hmm. Melissa, I'm curious about one of the things that you mentioned about within your role with BMorrow is about sustainable growth. And you said it's one thing to grow and another thing to have a sustainable growth plan. Wonder if you can expand on that, tell us what the difference is and what you do to ensure a sustainable growth plan.
Yeah, so sustainable growth to me is, again, I'm big on first people. You got to get the right people on the bus, doing the right things in the right roles. And then the projects will follow. The work will follow if you have the right people influencing the type of program that you're delivering. in an industry that is known for its ebbs and flows, it's known for the waviness, it's known for the gig workers, right? It's known for there's a big project right now, and then what's next? Sustainable growth to me is filling all of those what next holes. So you are not always just waiting for the next big project. Your portfolio is diversified. You're looking at different types of projects or work that not only fulfill the business, but also fulfill the creativity of the team that surrounds you. You're bringing different perspectives to the table. And then how are you really empowering them to use those perspectives in the different industries? Themed entertainment is so much bigger than how it's been defined in the past, right? We used to know it as theme parks and expanding out into cultural and zoos and aquariums and location-based entertainment, cruise ships, hospitality, resorts, festivals, you name it, it is, right? It's anywhere somebody can gain an experience now. So when we're looking at growing a business, it's not only what your core is, but how does your core really start to influence everything else? And when you're looking at sustaining an organization, you can't just go after the next big project. You have to make sure your buckets are filled with very diversified projects, people, and different types of programs. So those ebbs and flows become a little bit more easier to manage. So you grow maybe a little bit slower, a little bit more succinctly, but really at the end of the day, at the end of 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, you have a business and a team that has really been able to do that alongside of you.
Melissa, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more to that core and how that drives your business decisions, maybe in what projects to take or even who to bring on for those projects.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, BMP has this really, really amazing and I think pretty unique philosophy that I haven't personally seen championed so much in this industry, which is called Studio for All. So our Studio for All initiative is all about bringing in diverse perspectives, removing the barriers of entry that would exist maybe in some other types of organizations. So removing sometimes the requirement of formalized education, providing proper accommodations. So if you have an accommodation where you can't sit still all day long, making sure that that accommodation is met in order to fulfill that role of responsibility. And it's all about building perspectives. As you are designing attractions, or you're designing experience, you're not designing for yourselves, you're designing maybe for your future selves, right? The Gen Zs, the next generations that are coming. And what better way to do it than making sure that the perspectives around the table are as unique as the guests that are going to the experiences. And what Studio for All really does is it says, we don't really care where you're from. We don't care your genetic makeup. We don't care if you have formalized education from a 4-year college or a trade school or whatever it may be. If you have a desire and a willingness and a talent, we're here to foster that. We're here to put you around the table so you do have a voice. And it is actually our responsibility to make sure that those voices are being heard. And I think that really is what our core is. And as long as leadership really champions that, then you start to see the rest of our organization, our core, really start to expand and champion those messages as well. And then that filters down into our projects. So we're a start at the top and then let it influence the projects versus the projects influencing who we are.
Can you talk a little bit about how you make sure that that is more than the core? I'm thinking about, anyone who's listening to this and very inspired by that message of saying, how do we bring this into our organization and not just have it be an initiative, but have it be part of the DNA, have it be really running through everyone's veins and part of the core to make sure that it is a natural, seamless part of the organization and the culture.
Yeah, if you want change, then be change. You got to start somewhere, and those little, the little steps you make, by giving credit to those that might not have a seat at the leadership table, but who have come up with a great idea, and instead of taking credit for it as your own, saying, "Hey, this individual had this great idea. Let me bring this forward to this team in this type of form." And maybe they don't have a seat at the table right now, but they certainly now have a voice because you brought it there. Really, if you're going to live by the principles, live it every day. Your team notices that you as a leader are either walking the walk or you're not. And doing it when nobody else is around and nobody is paying. You don't have the microphone or the microscope on you all the time. And those are the times that really matter. So I would say if you want change, be change. The small steps matter because they always make larger steps in the forefront. And give credit. The small things you can do is give credit where credit's due. So often as leaders, when something's going well, we just kind of let it pass by and we forget to say, "Hey, you're doing a great job. Hey, this is good. Have you thought about it like this as well?" And continuing that education process, where you're continuing to grow each other and you're getting learnings from those individuals also. And that would be my last thing is actively listen. Don't listen to respond. Actively listen to hear what people are telling you. So often we fall into a routine of listening so we can gain a response, and you actually don't hear what people are trying to tell you. If you just slow down a little bit, take a step back, it's pretty amazing what people are talking to you about.
It sounds like a lot of what you're talking about there also reflects back on what you talked about with sustainability. It's all coming full circle. Can you also talk a little bit about that people side of it? I love how you talk about listening to people and giving them a voice, giving them a seat at the table, and how that really helps that sustainability process when you have people that really feel engaged and involved and valued.
Well, and then they're bought in, right? What better way to get somebody engaged and then they're bought in? They understand the end game here, right? They understand the bigger picture. They're not here to just show up to work and punch a clock. They understand the bigger picture of what the company is trying to do on a global level. And these are humans, right? They're not just workhorses. They're not just, hey, show up to work and open up CAD or go into Rhino or open up Adobe and start designing. No, this is the human side of this business that's so important. And gaining their perspectives. They have families. They have travels that they do. How can we start to learn and really gain from what they're bringing to the table? One of the things actually that BMP does, and I'm not going to take credit for it because it actually came from PGV Destinations. PGV has this great program called PGV Go, where they give their employees a stipend on an annual basis. And that stipend is meant to you can use it for travel, you can use it for theme park tickets. It's meant to influence you from a creative standpoint. It's meant to inspire you. It's meant to influence you. And it's a brilliant program, right? It's really, hey, your world, the way you create the world happens outside of this office. It actually happens outside of these doors. And how do we foster that creativity so you bring it back here in order to make that next experience that much better? So taking that idea from PGV, BMP is now doing it on a smaller level. Most of our folks use it for Halloween Horror Nights tickets or things like that, which is fine. It's not my thing. I'm a scaredy cat. But you know, it does start to influence. And what has happened with that program in particular is the groups are starting to do these things together. So now not only are they working on a day-to-day basis next to each other and benchmarking off of each other, they then want to hang out with each other. And I mean, what other better way to enjoy where you're working than to actually enjoy the people you're working alongside of? And I really think that that's a difference maker, no matter where you are. Creating that environment where people enjoy what they're doing and enjoy who they're doing it with and for is very, very important.
Can we unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah.
When they're utilizing that incentives, whether they're at Halloween Horror Nights as a group, or if you are traveling, or if you're visiting a theme park or whatever it is, what are the things that everyone should be looking for, and then what do those conversations turn into if it is a social experience amongst each other? Where are the gears turning that kind of lead into now conversations happening back in the office?
Yeah, so when you're in this industry, right, we become a little jaded. Queue experiences are amazing, and what's the number one thing we hate doing is waiting in a queue. Like, oh man, where's the fast pass? How do we skip all of this line, right? When they're going with each other, they're actually enjoying the queue experience because they're enjoying hanging out with each other. So they're gaining, what are people really doing in a queue? Are they playing heads up? Are they complaining about something? Are they looking at the projection that's on this wall? How is a typical guest experiencing this type of attraction or experience? And a lot of times we're using those dollars for projects that you would never think to go to. Maybe you're traveling internationally and it's an experience that you normally wouldn't get to go and see. How does that influence an experience design? How does a young child, I have 3 young kids, how do they experience an attraction is very, very different than the way I would or my colleague would. So I like to use my experience dollars with them because as they're 2 teenagers and a 9-year-old, so the way that they experience something is so different because they're like this with the phone in their face. And I'm like, hello, can we put this down and look at this cool thing, where my 9-year-old is completely immersed in it. So it's just a really interesting, way to take yourself out of the industry and really put yourself in the feet of the guests, which I think we all need to do that a little bit more often, probably.
Absolutely. I'm going to say right now, Josh, we need an Attraction Pros Go fund. So put that on the list. We're going to talk about that at our next strategy meeting.
Courtesy of PGAV. So
right. We will give credit where credit
I'm giving credit where credit is due there.
100%. 100%. Melissa, one of the things I wanted to ask you about coming into this role that you're in as the Chief Business Officer, I understand that this role did not exist before, and this is something you came into, you're creating the role. So how is it coming in and creating a role versus coming into an established role where maybe somebody was there like, this is what that person does. Now you've got this kind of wide open canvas to kind of create anything you want.
Yeah, it's terrifying, right? I mean, it's great though, because the role is largely undefined, and but here was the need, right? BMP was growing so quickly, so rapidly, and Brian, as the creative founder and executive, really was finding himself more in the weeds. And I think the comment was made, people don't hire BMP, Brian, to get an invoice from you. They hire BMP for his creative mind. It's amazing. So how do we start to get Brian out of the weeds, elevate him up to a chief creative executive, and then be able to bring in the process, the experience, and the operations side, the growth side, the strategy side into the business that allows Brian to be creative and the rest of the business to run sustainably. So it's a learning curve for everybody, right? When you're coming into a new role and into a new company, everything's a little different. All the things you thought you knew, you don't know. But the people are amazing. They're willing to teach. I'm learning Smartsheet. So if there's any Smartsheet experts out there, reach out because, again, math, technology, not my two fortes. But it's been really empowering because it's also allowed me to stretch who I am and really take all of my past background from manufacturing, from finance, from doing development and marketing with Nassal, and really bringing it all into, and then also the TEA strategy side, and bringing it all into one role and looking in a hyper lens to this organization saying, okay, here's what we do excellent, and here's the evolution of what the company can be. Because it is only 5 years old, it's grown so fast and so quickly. Sometimes getting your arms around it is probably the largest challenge. But it's fun. It's a great group of people, and an amazing journey so far. And I've really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more on the design side also. That was something brand new for me.
Interesting. So you mentioned TEA, and we'd love to talk a little bit about that as well. You're the president of TEA's International Board of Directors. Can you talk a little bit about what that entails? And I would say even kind of from the beginning, for those who might not be familiar with TEA, what is it?
Yeah. So TEA, Themed Entertainment Association, is really the global associations for the makers and creators of stories and experiences globally. We are the magic makers. We are those experienced drivers. Global association, it's about 1,600 members. Of those 1,600 members, that represents about 25,000 individuals. Because a member's a company, or a company could be a company of one, could be a company of thousands. And it really is the story of those that create the stories, the builders, the fabricators, the designers, the architects, and all of the different contributors to that process. TEA really was the catalyst for me in the immersion into themed entertainment. As somebody who came in, I had no idea the industry existed when I started working at Nassal. TEA really was the opportunity for me to actually work check-in desk at their industry mixers. They do industry mixers around the world, and in Orlando, they were frequent. They're about once a month. And I used the check-in desk as an opportunity to understand who was there, what their companies were, and what they looked like. And then I would go home and I would go on LinkedIn and I would say, okay, how does show control relate to rock work? I have no idea. And then the next time I would see the person who did show control, the next mixer, I'd say, oh, hi, I'm Melissa. Can you tell me about how this interacted with each other on this attraction? And I started to learn. Again, it was all about surrounding yourself with the people that knew more than you, and knowing how to ask the right questions. From there, I ticked up in the leadership, and I was fortunate to be the president of the Eastern North America division in 2017 and 2018. And now I serve on the international board as the international board president. I'm in my second year there. And it's really been, well, other than it being my second full-time free job, it's been an amazing journey. it really, the international board of directors, there's about 24 directors, are comprised of some of the most gracious and I guess I admire them, most admirable leaders of the themed entertainment industry globally, both those that currently serve as well as those who have previously served. So I feel very honored to be really looking at how we grow the industry, how we expand it, how we continue to foster an environment for the future workforce of this industry, how we provide the right type of knowledge sharing and leadership in order for future generations to have careers in this industry. And then also the elevation of the brand, where this is the community you want to hire when you're wanting to build world-class attractions around the world. So how do we continue to elevate our members and our association to do so? So I feel very honored, and it's a lot of fun. It's a great group of individuals.
And so speaking of leadership and taking the TEA into the future, we understand that you're going to be looking for, or you are currently looking for, someone to kind of take the helm.
Yeah, so have been extremely fortunate. We've had an amazing executive director, Lindsay Nelson, who joined us back in 2021, whose contract is expiring this coming June. So we are currently undergoing our search for our next executive leader, and really looking to leverage the industry experience of somebody. We're in year 3 of our strategic plan. Our strategic plan is a 5-year plan. And with the industry evolving so rapidly, with the words themed entertainment or themed experience really being so broad, with workforce development being top of mind, find good people, foster good people, keep good people, right? Retain, grow. We really are looking for the next leader of the association to take what has been done so far and really catapult us forward. We feel the opportunities are vast, and we really feel excited for what the future can bring. So yeah, we're undergoing a CEO search right now. We're very excited about it. We're excited about the potential of what this brings to the association. And we're not wanting to be complacent in who we are and what we bring to the table. We want the TE to be at the front of this. We want to be driving the industry forward, not waiting to be tailed behind it. We really feel confident that our next leader can help continue the good work that's been done and really continue to push that forward.
So what does the ideal candidate look like for the CEO as part of your search here?
That's a great question. So really, I think somebody with a strong industry knowledge, an industry knowledge, gosh, you know, that word is so hard to define, right? Because industry knowledge, what's industry, right? That's like the debates around a board table of what is the industry are always a fun way to end a dinner party. But somebody who understands not just where we are, but where we're going. I'd love to see somebody who has a vision for the TEA, an entrepreneurial spirit, great business savviness and financial acumen. You know, the TEA is still recovering in the post-COVID environment, right? We were hit hard, just like most businesses were, and the climb out as an association is always much harder and longer than a typical business would be. So somebody with a strong financial sense, strong business acumen, and the ability to really lead a staff and empower a staff. We have an entirely new staff at TEA also, highly capable, highly confident. So a great leader, a leader of people. I talked earlier about how important your bench is and how important a great leader is to really making sure right people are on the bus, doing the right things. So I think the right leader for us is going to be able to really leverage the team that's been put in place. So yeah, we're very hopeful. I have no doubt that we'll be able to find the right person at the right time.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Melissa, for sharing that. And you never know, your next CEO might be listening right now. So thank you very much for going through that. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I do have a question about the other person that you work for, about Brian. Going back to your comment about he got in the weeds, and then it became the kind of the organization's job to get him out of the weeds and find ways to do that, and that's where your position came from. And I've worked with a number of people who are so passionate and so good at what they do, but they find themselves in that very same position, kind of being in the weeds, and maybe not acting soon enough to bring more people on board so that they can do the things that they need to do at their level. So like Josh asked a little bit ago, can we unpack that process a little bit? What did Brian need to hear to say, hey, it's time, we need to do this, and this is the right thing to do for the business?
Oftentimes succession planning is an afterthought in organizations. You look at succession planning can actually have multiple facets to it. Succession planning doesn't mean that a person has to be exiting a business. Succession planning is actually making sure that you are accurately and adequately planning the life cycle of your business and how it's being done, right? So for Brian, this is all about making sure succession planning is an active, ongoing conversation. Brian's not going anywhere, so don't worry, anybody. But it's really about how do you continue to evolve as an organization and as an individual. Even as an executive leader, you still need to make sure that you are evolving as an individual, that you're still making sure that you're developing yourself. And I talked a little bit about why do people come to work here? Why do they hire BMP? And we have an amazing group of talent here, without a doubt. But then we also have Brian, who's a little bit of our secret sauce. And when you're looking at a type of succession planning, it's about making sure that you have the people doing the right jobs for you. So then you can make sure you're leveraging unique skill sets or unique capabilities in the best possible way. And really, so the conversation with Brian was a little bit of that. Are you enjoying what you're doing now? What do you miss about what you're doing? And is there a fit where I can potentially help with that? As a creative mind, Brian's a creative mind. That's his passion. That's what he loves. That's what drives him. That's what influences him. So as you start to kind of go away from that, because the business side, you do need to run the business, but you also want to be creative. If you can't rebalance that out, then you have a problem, right? And that's part of that succession planning that he was looking at. Okay, if I want to do more of this, if I want to fill more of my cup creatively, then I need to start to balance this other side of the business acumen side. And so that's how I ended up coming to the table. But it's an active conversation, and I think it's one that business leaders or business owners should actively be having. Like I said, succession planning doesn't mean retirement, doesn't mean ending our careers. It doesn't mean you're going somewhere. It just means sometimes a realigning of the role and responsibilities. So you make sure that you as a leader are doing what you love as well. And then bringing in the right tools or team to offset and to build that bench strength for you.
Hmm.
I think that's such an important message, and I think that it's something that a lot of people can be thinking about more and more. Kind of like Matt said, of being too far in the weeds. And, you know, I hear people say a lot, I'm working so much in my business that I don't have the ability to work on my business. And this idea of succession planning, like you said, does not need to be like the show Succession. It's kind of
Right.
my takeaway from that, and my interpretation from that. So thank you so much for sharing that. So we still have a few minutes left here, and we just have a couple more questions here, but we'd love to know if someone approached you and said, I want to design attractions and experiences, what's the first thing that they should do?
I mean, really understand what your non-negotiable traits are for the type of company you want to work with. Finding a company that aligns with you from a morals, value, and cultural standpoint is very, very important. So often we look at, okay, you want to do this? Yeah, you can go take this class and go look at this type of curriculum and really identify, you know, what parts of this process do you love or do you enjoy? And I think everybody would probably answer down that lane. I'm going to skip ahead and say, find a company that you love, and find a culture that you feel like this is your community. This is where you fit. Every company has its own unique culture and set of values and what I call non-negotiable traits, aspects of the organization that makes them unique or different. Not every person fits in every type of organization, and that doesn't mean one is better than the other. It just means that know the right questions to ask, and try not to compromise on who you are as a person and your non-negotiables. Of course, we're so fortunate now to have so many great curriculums across the board, that really formally train us on how to work in themed entertainment. But oftentimes they are design driven or they're engineering driven. You can do marketing, you can do accounting, you can do other types of jobs within themed entertainment outside of, are you an artist, or are you an engineer, or are you an architect? I'm none of those things, actually. I'm zero. I'm in marketing. That's my background. So really, and then find a role that you're passionate about. Themed entertainment is so broad. It's not just theme parks, right? If you're passionate about the conservation of animals, go and work within zoos or aquariums, design habitats, talk about how you bring conservation messages to the future conservationists of the world. That's your guests who are going and experiencing those animals. That there's a reason why. So really think about what drives you as a person passionately, and see if you can align yourselves in working in those types of forums or environments.
Melissa, there's something I'd like to follow up on, because you've said it a number of times, but in a couple of different contexts, and it's about knowing what questions to ask. And that's something that rings true to me as someone who works with people, and I coach people. And I have one particular client who we might have an hour meeting and I'll ask one question and he's like, boom, that's all I needed today, you know, that kind of thing. So how do you know what those right questions are?
You don't. You kind of have to know who the right people are, right? So here's something interesting. So I'm a big believer of swim lanes, right? You know, swim lanes. So you're in a pool, you're all sharing water. It might be splashing, but you have a very clear swim lane. You know your swim lane in and out. You also know who's next to you. Know who surrounds you, know who you're going to be slapping in to dive in after you. Make sure that you're surrounding yourself with the people that can complement what you bring to the table. Because I can guarantee you, if you can do that, the brain trust that you're bringing to a project, to a table, to a project, to whatever that environment is going to be so much bigger and better. than just one person as an individual, right? So it's not always about what's the right questions. It's first you got to start with who's the right people, and then knowing your swim lane, know kind of what your capacity is, but have a good understanding and a respect for those that are surrounding you. Not the only one in the pool, right? You're sharing this with a lot of different types of collaborators, with a lot of different types of people. So have a common respect. And then the last thing with knowing the right questions is, and this is really difficult sometimes, but speak to people at the level that they deserve or can understand to be spoken to. So if you're speaking to someone who has an expert knowledge of project management or design development, make sure that you're coming to the table and you're also speaking at the same level as them. Versus maybe I'm speaking to a young student who is looking at studying design, going into university. The way that I would describe a process might be two very different ways. They're not disrespectful in one way or the other. It's actually more respectful because you're speaking to them at the level that they can understand it the best. So sometimes when you're asking questions, keep the questions simple. Don't overcomplicate it so you can just hear yourself speak. Be concise, be clear, be deliberate with what you're asking so you can gain the clarity that you need in order to go to the next step of whatever the process is or whatever clarity you're looking for.
Excellent. That's great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. So Melissa, as we start to wind this down here, if people want to get a hold of you directly, learn more about BMorrow Productions, learn more about TEA, or apply to be the next CEO of TEA, where would you send them?
Oh boy. Okay. So yeah.
Multi-part question.
So much. So best way to reach me is to email me at melissa@BMorrowProductions.com. BMorrow Productions is all one word with an S at the end. If you're interested in the TEA CEO role, you can email search@teaconnect.org. And that job position profile is on the TEA website and can be viewed. But please, this is an open door. I love to hear from everybody. Would love to interact. If there's questions or if there's anything else I can answer, please don't hesitate to reach out to me by email, via LinkedIn, in whatever capacity.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Melissa, for your time. We really appreciate it. And for everybody out there who's watching and listening, just remember, we are all attraction pros. Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit attractionpros.com.